Commander Sundell. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Great. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming. We've been sitting here drinking coffee, chatting, and we finally got the cameras going.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to get after it.
Yeah.
Listen, you and I got connected because I have wandered very oddly into the geospace. Dude, this is really embarrassing.
Yeah.
So the only experience I've ever had with geological stuff was I was a freshman in college.
Everyone has that story.
And I had one class I had to fill, and it was like, I only needed like 2 units or something to round out my schedule. And they're like, oh, take Geo 80. I was like, Geo 80? What's Geo 80? They're like, bro, rocks for jocks.
Sure.
I was like,
Yeah.
what? And it was this class, Geo class, that actually turned out to be really interesting. I wouldn't know because I never took it. I'm like, I'm not taking a class called Rocks for Jocks.
Right.
But it was a Geo 80 course, and there were all these problems within the city of Berkeley, right? Like you obviously have Berkeley Hills, Oakland Hills. Why do you have that? Well, there's been, plates and everything. It's hilarious. The fault line for Berkeley runs straight down from the hills, hits the Berkeley football stadium, literally goes around the border of it, and then continues on down. They actually just rebuilt the stadium about, I think, 15 years ago, because the fault line apparently didn't actually go around the stadium, and the stadium was splitting apart.
Right.
It's like, dude.
There's a...
and they went out on like field trips and looked at that stuff. So it was actually a really interesting course.
There's a sidewalk in that part of Berkeley, famously, that's just like curb and gutter. And it's right on the San Andreas Fault, and it's slowly offset, right? I mean, so the offsets are like a few centimeters per year. And so over the years, it had accumulated maybe 1.5 feet of offset. And so it was this curb and gutter that was beautifully offset, and people would come from all around, like geology nerds would come, and like you can see the offset of the San Andreas Fault in this one very specific curb and gutter cut. And there was, I think it was a GSA conference or some sort of, maybe AGU, I guess it's San Francisco. So it's like a tour bus, like doing urban geology, but it's all geologists who are there for a conference, and they all go here. And the California Highway Department had fixed it because in their mind, it wasn't anything special, right?
Right.
And so this like whole tour bus full of geologists are like, no, they fixed the sidewalk. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
That was our whole field trip stop.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So that was really the only experience I had with it. And then naturally I had really dark experiences in my adult life that I just experienced through media. You have the concern over the last 2 decades that you were told to have about the mining industry in general. The only interaction I ever had in media with mining professionals was obviously like, oh, these miners are trapped in like a coal mine somewhere. Yeah. Always seemed really terrifying. Zoolander, right? Like they're down in the coal mines. It's like, I got the black lung. And again, not representative of reality in any way, shape, or form. And it really seemed to be a vestige of an industry that we've long since outlived. It's like, oh, well, let's just get solar panels and eliminate the need for mining. Because in your mind, all that you need is, all you need is like coal.
Right.
Then you come to find out, Leo does blood diamond, and you're like, is that real? Like what?
Right.
Then you have the problems with electric vehicles, where it's like, hey, we need a lot of cobalt. It's like, what's that? They're like, is that a color?
Well,
They're like,
not even cobalt, copper as well.
Right.
So when you look at the whole kind of, transitioning to what we think of as like a green energy future, like the metals required to do that are astounding.
Right.
And again, the cobalt's probably one of the best examples where you'll see these things on social media.
May I interrupt you just briefly?
Sure.
You are a professor of geoscience at College of Western Idaho.
I am a professor of geoscience.
That's how you and I got connected.
Yes.
For those listening, okay, please continue. The green energy.
So green energy, one of the standard things that you'll see is like some child working in an artisanal mine in Africa, separating cobalt. And you look at that and you think like, well, geez, that's terrible, right? And maybe I can't get behind this green energy future if it's going to require these children working in these streams. And no one's really mentioning, well, what about the cobalt belt in Idaho, right? Like we have those resources here. And if we're starting to kind of further rely on them, we're going to have to, it makes much more sense to start bringing that production back to stateside.
Okay, but I feel like we just skipped over a lot.
We did. We skipped over a lot. Yeah.
So bottom line is my interest in this really started coming from realizing it's like, hey, wait a minute. like, okay, yeah, blood diamond. I'm like, fine, dude. I don't buy diamonds, whatever.
Right.
But then you start inserting complexities within the, within the green energy space, within electrical vehicle spaces. And this really brought up questions of where are we sourcing this stuff? Then I hear this word antimony like start getting thrown around. And it takes me, I have to hear it like 10 times before I can even remember what the word is.
Right.
And you meet with, in fact, Kelly Younger, who in the Office of Energy and Mineral Resources in Idaho, and start learning like, no. This is like an international struggle in that there are suppliers for rare earth minerals and critical minerals that do not want the United States to have their own domestic access to these things because we rely on these international, not friendlies to get them. And so then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what does that mean? They're like, it means we're in a real problem because domestically, people don't like the idea of mining. And you have large organizations that fund both local and national level organizations that are essentially just friction against this. It's like like my stated goal is to get you to stop raping and pillaging the earth, aka no mining. Okay. But we as consumers, we're not stopping our consumption of these materials. So that puts the United States in a pickle. It's like, well, if we can't get past the problems with mining here, we are forced to buy from, say, China or from Russia or, wherever. And by the way, they may not even have it in their own country. They may just be contracting with a military dictatorship in the Congo that's holding a 6-year-old at gunpoint and has to be like separating cobalt in this river, right?
Sure.
These are the problems that I started understanding. I was like, wait a minute, how does this, like, how did we get into this point as a nation? And why aren't we just in the most responsible way going after our own resources to not just save the 6-year-old from that fate, but also stop being beholden to countries that don't wish us well? So like, help me understand the background of how the United States found itself in this place and, where we are with contemporary mining, and that's it. Hit me.
Okay, that's a
it's
big
a lot.
one.
We got a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, we've had mining in the United States for a very long time. And most of that time, there was very little, if any, regulation, worker regulation or environmental regulation.
Sure.
And a lot of the mining kind of ruins or the kind of mining sites that we see now were processed or mined with essentially zero oversight. And not in all cases it was zero oversight. I think the first environmental laws passed in the United States had to do with mining. They had to do with what was called hydraulic mining, where they had these big water guns and they were just literally washing away hillsides.
They used that in the Grand Canyon.
In California, up near Idaho City, so much more local. And actually, if you go to Idaho City, there's a fountain that's one of these big guns, and you can go and look at it. It's cool. But I think, people started to look around and said like, maybe that's pretty terrible. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And, you kind of fast forward a ways. We get kind of into, the early 1970s when the EPA comes into existence. I think in 1972, my number might be a little bit off.
Sure.
But soon after that, we started to have environmental regulations and in a much more systematic way, kind of coming down from the federal government. And that kind of couples with a few different things that happen. And so as we go through the 70s and into the 80s, there's commodity prices start to get really low. But now that these companies are having to follow the rules, or oftentimes there are projects that were grandfathered in. And so when the new kind of NEPA regulations occurred, they could continue operating if their project was already permitted, right? Because that makes sense, right? You planned for a certain cost. But so really in the late 80s, things kind of come to a halt. And one of the culprits was actually gold was like $300 an ounce, right? And oftentimes gold can fund other projects, right? Mines aren't just pulling out one commodity, they're pulling out gold and other. And so if gold is, $300 or $400 an ounce, it's not going to actually pay for the mines. The mine shuts down.
How much is like a viable price per ounce for something like gold?
Well, it depends on the project, right?
Oh,
so,
gotcha. That would make total sense.
A lot of times miners talk about things in grams per ton. And so at a ton of rock is basically a cubic meter. and like 2 grams of gold is maybe the size of a BB, right? And so 2 grams per ton is a very viable amount of gold to be pulling out per cubic meter. That's profitable.
Wow.
Well, you scale it up, right? Because you're pulling out however many
huge
tons
volumes
of rock per day, and
Yeah.
and so the numbers actually start to pencil out. But every mine has essentially what we call a cutoff grade, right? Because it costs X amount of dollars in workers and equipment to do the work, and if the resource that's being produced isn't going to pay for that, then it's a bum deal, right? And
Sure.
lock the front gate, and then go watch the stock market for 15 years. And when gold prices go back up, unlock the gate. If it were that simple, right? I mean, that involves permitting. It involves a lot of kind of outside. There's a lot of paperwork that has to happen to make that work. But so really, in the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of our mineral extraction or minerals that we used just became outsourced. It was actually much cheaper to buy these from countries or other places that had, no environmental regulations. So these mines could operate in a much different way. Smaller countries, workers, getting paid far less, in terms of wages, all sorts of things.
They don't have OSHA.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like incredibly variable from country to country, right?
Sure.
But yeah, so it just became like truly from an economic point of view, just cheaper to buy it from someone else. And then that means all of our projects go fallow. And probably antimony is, at least if you're in Idaho, is probably one of the ones that kind of comes up often. You're obviously just learning about antimony or recently. And we got, maybe in the neighborhood of 90% of our antimony from China. It kind of falls into the critical minerals and even more specifically critical minerals for defense. And of fall 2024, China just said no, right? Like, there is now a blockade on antimony. We will not sell it to you anymore. Good luck with that. And
to be clear, the definition of a critical mineral is it has to pass 2 things, which it has to be absolutely needed for economic or defensive capabilities in the United States, and we cannot produce it, and if you cover those 2 things, then you become a critical mineral. And China owns or controls, I think, out of the 50 critical minerals in the United States, owns or controls roughly 30 of them.
Right.
Antimony being one of them, which means for defensive capabilities, this is something that the US government has deemed we absolutely need this for defensive capabilities, and we cannot produce it ourselves. And China, the main person that was giving us at scale, because you can say like, hey man, Australia has antimony, or like, no, there's antimony in Utah. Not at the level you need. We need a lot of it, and we need a very specific formulation of it. Right. China had that, no more. But Idaho has some as well.
Yeah, and exactly. So I think, a lot of people kind of turn their eyes back to domestic production. And one of the things that's really kind of interesting about geologists, and, this came up in many conversations at the past, the Idaho Mining Conference, just recently here in Boise. The geologists they were an interesting breed, right? People always say that, but one of the things that makes us kind of unique is that we're pragmatists, right? So I think what you'll find when you talk to most geologists is that they are environmentalists at heart, right? Because we love the outdoors. That's kind of how we got into this. But we're pragmatists in the sense that we recognize, like, life is full of subtlety, right? Life is not ones and zeros. It's not black versus white. And so when we look at mineral resources and our needs and kind of the needs of a nation, whether or not you're a supporter of, the U.S. military, I think we can all acknowledge that, like, you have to have a military, right? And you have to have, critical minerals that are used by that military. And so recognizing that we have very few options, looking towards domestic mining seems to be like a pretty viable option. And then that additionally comes with jobs, and that comes with, economic kind of impact, positive economic impacts for areas. But that also comes with environmental degradation, largely overseen by, NEPA regulations and, many other environmental agencies that are involved.
And this kind of comes to the position we're in now, which is, hey, we have a lot of good stuff we could get out of the earth. Okay. But we also have regulations that people have to abide by. That is a complex enough relationship in itself for people to navigate, because obviously you can't have, like, one of the things that I found interesting that I learned recently from a Idaho Geological Survey guy is like, look, antimony in its by itself is not that valuable. It's not valuable to warrant the investment of time, energy, capital, all this stuff to go get it. Now we need it. It's not that valuable. But again, we really, really need it.
Right.
What you have to have is something that makes money alongside the antimony to warrant the extraction of all of these products from a specific area, be that silver, be that gold, be it platinum, whatever it might be. But you need that breadwinner that you can then get like tangentially. So you have this conflict where it's like, okay, we need projects that will yield these very, very vital materials, but we also need people that are going to make money doing it, right? So you have this environmental degradation, which is a problem, right? We have these environmental costs, even if done to the standards. Like, nobody likes the idea of an open pit mine and like tailings and all that stuff, right? Totally fine. But then you have organizations that are like, they're making money, right? And people are mad that mining organizations and mining projects yield revenue. But it's like, okay, there's no other way to do this. There's no way where you can just say, hey man, can you only pull out the things that we absolutely need? Because the answer is, sure, I could try, but the cost would be so astronomical that the U.S. government, you wouldn't pay the cost of it. So it would be better if you just let us find a place that has both things, something that's like the breadwinner and then something that's the spin-off tangential product. And that opens a whole new can of worms, which is like moral objection. So it's like we could sacrifice some aspect of our wildlands or our public lands in our areas, but like we don't want to do it for people that are making money, right? We should only do it for defensive things. Like these things come together. You can't parse them out.
Yeah, and I think first of all, just to kind of build on what you were saying, I think antimony right now is like $30 a pound. Whereas gold, we were just talking about, it's $4,000 an ounce right now, right? And so
16 ounces to a pound, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's like $64,000 for a pound.
Yeah, exactly. So the price discrepancies are pretty big. And looking at projects here in Idaho, they're by volume, they're probably pulling out more of these other minerals than the gold, but the gold that they do pull out is orders of magnitude more valuable, so funds the project.
So the gold might only be 1% of all valuable things they pull out, but because it's so expensive, that's what actually funds everything else.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I'm not going to hold you to like 1%.
Yeah, right.
Like, let's say between 1 and 20%.
Sure. Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. And then, the other thing that is kind of important to think about is that, we talk about, environmental impacts, and the world is very different, right? So mining in 2025, from an environmental point of view, is much different than mining in 1925 or 1945, for that matter.
Sure. I would imagine the smelting process is also much different.
Yeah, there's a lot that used to be, like in the olden days, people would take mercury and use that and then just cook the mercury off in the open air. Like, clearly we're not going to do that anymore.
Did you ever, I doubt it, but have you ever heard it's a one-off podcast series called Shit Town? It's incredible. Like, it was great. So it was this, I think it was PBS did it. I can't remember exactly, but worth your time. I think it's like 10 episodes and they're 45 minutes to an hour, but it goes through this process of this one journalist meeting this guy like in the middle of nowhere, right? And the guy's like seems super eccentric, like really out there. Turns out he's a horologist. And this guy was this master horologist, somebody who's interested in clocks. And he had engaged in this broad practice of gold gilding. Where essentially they would mix gold and mercury and he would paint it onto things and then the mercury would evaporate. Now, obviously that's a practice that has been outlawed for it, but he'd like go into the woods and do this. And as somebody who loved clocks and horology, people would come to him. They're like, do you know how? He's like, I got this. Just like go out there. But it, again, mad as a hatter, right? Like the mercury was really damaging.
Or
so
it's like the people using radium,
oh
like
my God, the poor ladies that would like lick the radium paint and then their faces like fell apart. Yeah. So like we had bad practices.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, a lot of these projects, maybe they're thinking, 20, 25-year mine life. A lot of them have aspects of those projects that are doing environmental restoration, and that restoration work starts like year 5, right? Like as the operations of the mine move around, there's people doing wetland restoration in one part of the mine where there's active mining happening, a quarter of a mile over, right? So it's not necessarily like the mine happens, right? And there's this kind of period of extraction, and then, an alarm goes off and they come back and fix everything. Right. It all happens kind of naturally, right? Parts of the project are kind of mitigated, I guess, as other parts are moving forward.
I presume you've spent significant time at the Stibnite mine.
No, yeah. I've never actually been to the site.
Never been?
Yeah.
You've never been.
I know. I'm
believe you.
Week 1 of September. It's on the books. I'm headed up there this year.
It's pretty. Yeah. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
I was really taken though going up there. You hear, like I had heard a lot of things about it, and going up there, and first off, you see aspects of the area, and they're like, yeah, so this was, and you're like, wow, that's beautiful. It'd be terrible to like bang that up, and they're like, no, that's what we did. I was like, wait, what do you mean? They're like, no, this was nasty from like, World War II. We, over the last several years, we replanted all, and you see all these trees, like the trees don't know, the trees don't care, right? There's also one large pit area where there are all these conifers growing out of the side. And it's funny. It's like, they don't know what happened, and they don't care. Like the trees are just growing as everything grows, right?
People care, right? Like when you go there to recreate, but so they're like, that's not the only motivation, but it is a motivation for, doing that restoration work, right?
No, I'm not speaking against restoration. What I'm saying is, one, I do agree with you that it occurred to me, it's like, the second you open something, you ever messed around with fish tanks?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them.
I love fish tanks.
The boys have fish tanks.
My kids have fish tanks, no problem. The second you clean that glass, man, the algae doesn't care. Like it starts going. So when you're talking about like, hey, it's not like, the mining occurs and then all of a sudden everything starts regrowing. It's like, no, the second you open the earth, things start growing back into it because the earth doesn't really care. Now, this is not an advocacy for, mismanagement of earth, but, it is regrowing. Like in 100 years, even to the untrained eye, for me going up there, I'm like, wait, which part was mined and which part wasn't? Right. And I'm sure you could figure it out, and I'm sure other experts could. But at the same time, the earth is regrowing and kind of retooling. Sure. Yeah. It's just very interesting to see that and realize, like, okay, one, it's taking the earth is coming back, and two, the contemporary mining operations up there are improving things. Like they're making it better. They're engaging in better planning and better management, connecting river systems again, all of these things. It's like, okay, that sounds good too. And I don't think people in the 1945 were like cared much. They're like, get antimony and call it a day.
Right. Yeah. And kind of in the whole realm of environmental engineering, I think that there are a lot of really incredible things that can be done when it comes to that restoration work. You kind of see some of these projects and just like, the amount of soils brought in, or even soils that are created to be brought in, because then soil itself is a resource. And you look at, if you really understand the ecology of an area, like it is possible to get pretty close to baseline, right? And baseline characterization is like prior to mining, what does the groundwater look like? What sorts of animals are here? What's the density of those animals? What plants are here? And, yes, mining is disruptive, but it is possible to get very close to that kind of initial condition.
Yeah. And here's one that I still cannot wrap my head around. Like I kind of have some idea, but okay, look, if we really are contemporary, United States citizens who care about the environment, we believe in these environmental standards, we believe in, humanitarian standards, we believe in all of this stuff, right? OSHA, NEPA, the whole thing. It blows, like, why don't we have every single environmental group, every single state agency concerned with this all across the country saying, hey man, We want every possible mining company right here. Now, you got to do these things. These things are not going to be easy, but how could we work with you to make sure that you can stay solvent, right? Because no company can operate at a loss. How can we work with you to make sure you stay solvent, that you abide by all of these things? And we don't have human suffering. We have, grown adults who are voluntarily engaging in this work, who have health care and pensions and all, like, fair pay, all of these things. And they're not, going to be sick and dead by the age of 15, right? The human suffering goes down. Okay. The supply. So we don't have to make deals with other countries that don't wish us well to get the thing we absolutely need. And then, of course, the environmental cost, because the concept of me only caring about the environment that I'm directly around, it's like, okay, that's fine. We can do that. Like, I'm happy with my backyard. My backyard's fine.
Of course.
Now, mind you, we just blew up Africa, but like, that's over there. It was like, no, if people really are environmentalists, shouldn't they care about things that they by proxy are responsible for? Like, if I'm really like a garbage dump, what if we took all of the garbage and just dumped it in Canada? Like, I wouldn't feel good about that. It's like, wait a minute, why can't we deal with our own garbage here? Like, let's figure something out, but the whole concept of like out of sight, out of mind environmentalism, that's really dangerous to me, because and out of sight, out of mind humanitarian suffering, out of sight, out of mind, international problems. Everybody got mad when there was the large wave of tariffs earlier in the year. It's like, okay, I'm not telling you should be happier that you might pay more for like a bottle of wine or whatever it might be. I don't know. But what I do know is there are good reasons that can be articulated line by line for needing something to bring international players to the table if they want access to the U.S. consumer market, which is like our ace in the hole every time. You want to sell stuff to people that like to buy stuff, you got to come to the table. Right. And there is a need for that. So like, why don't we have people lining up? Like, every environmental group should be like, stop killing the 6-year-old and exploding Africa. Come here, just follow these rules. Please come here, though.
Right. Well, again, that's a big one. But I think truly, like, the largest.
Bring this microphone to you. You keep like slowly moving away. There you go.
I think and again, I don't want to put words in kind of places where they don't belong, but probably one of the largest enemies to U.S. modern mining is the history of U.S. mining, right? Mining has kind of been its own worst enemy. And again, that's because a lot of the stuff that we have seen, like if you're, an avid outdoors person and you go see, a mine site from the 1940s, it's not great. And so it takes a lot to convince people that that's not going to happen again, right? I mean, I think there are regulations and, the companies that are involved don't want that to happen again because, again, they're shooting themselves in the foot. But it's really hard to get people to look past that, right? Or just to say, okay, I recognize that's not going to happen anymore. Great, let's keep moving forward. I think that there are a lot of people, and for good reason, who look at kind of the offenses that have happened in the past, right? We used to have a situation where you'd pay, a $10,000 environmental bond or cleanup bond, right? And then when the mine was done, you'd go bankrupt. Everyone would go get a different job. The state would take the $10,000, which was not enough to do the cleanup work, right? And that doesn't exist anymore. But it's really hard to communicate that mining is different now because it doesn't necessarily feel different to a lot of people, It feels like you're going out, extracting minerals. It's this extractive, destructive process, which parts of it are, but it has all of this kind of work built in that's the goal is to do the restoration work at the end, right? And I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone in the mining industry as a geologist or an administrator who wants to leave a big hole in the ground. But it's hard because there are big holes in the ground that people can see to convince them that that's not going to happen anymore.
Man. Name something from the 40s that we wouldn't look at right now and be like, never again.
Sure.
Like one of the things that I keep coming back to is just medical practices from the 40s. Like go back 20 years prior. Like when was penicillin made? Like, or like, remember that movie?
40s?
Yeah. It's like whenever.
Yeah.
Like it was sometime in the early 20th century, right?
Yeah.
What about like Dance with the Wolves? When was that? It's like they were like
1880.
Yeah, like they were just like bite on the stick and cut his leg off with a saw, right? That was the whole, like Kevin Costner didn't want to lose his leg, right? Like you have science and progress that we have made that was appalling. If we go back 80 years, 100 years, 120 years, we're like, dude, we could never live that way. Like that's insane. And the amazing thing is nobody's asking you to. Nobody's, from a medical standpoint, you don't like, when you go to see the doctor, there aren't a bunch of pictures of people dying in like sanitariums or like, you know, people with like dying from gangrene and all of these. Look, we don't have pictures of that.
Right.
But when you talk about mining, those are the pictures that are brought up.
Well, it's not only the pictures that are brought up. They're pictures of places you can go and see.
That's my point.
They still exist.
Yeah. Like, what if we had a statue of somebody with gangrene like in the middle of town, like right in front of the hospital? It's like, hey, you remember this from the 40s? And it's like, oh, I don't want to go in there. It's like, yeah, of course you wouldn't. So I think that's really one of those things where it's impossible to have cultural amnesia when it's right in front of you. But if you applied the same standards across any industry, be it healthcare, be it food, be it manufacturing, right? Like what did factories look like back in the 40s, right? Like what did cars look like? You want to get in a Model T and like drive it regularly? No, you do not, man. Yeah. It's like seatbelts weren't invented until like the 50s or something, right?
Yeah. So, you know, at CWI, like I have, you know, my geology students, and you're always kind of trying to show them what opportunities exist, right? Sure. Because you have to make sure that your degree and your content is relevant. And I talked to them about mining, obviously, right?
Sure.
And it's a big sticking point. People are like, well, I don't want to be part of, you know, destroying the earth. And I'm like, okay, well, you can get a job there working with groundwater, right? And making sure that the groundwater chemistry stays within the limits that it should be, right? So I'm like, there's environmental work to be had at these places as well. And oftentimes when you kind of talk about what it really looks like in 2025, they oftentimes come around and realize like, oh, this is actually a really cool opportunity, because what I want is I want to do something with my life that is purposeful, right? I want to make a difference in the world. And that's a place where you very realistically can, right? You could say, I want to do the restoration work, or I want to be there for all of it, right? I want to do the, you know, geological exploration and then be, you know, switch over to the restoration team. Like those are all very realistic things you could do in the industry. And so we've really been.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
When somebody says, I don't want to be part of, you know, like destroying the earth, do you tell them that they better go out into the woods and live in like a rock hut? Because like, it's like, you don't have to participate in the cleanest, most responsible mining operations in the world. You don't have to participate in those.
Right.
And that's fine. But if you don't want to be part of what's destroying the earth, you better throw away or donate or recycle every piece of technology that you have in your life, including your car, bicycle, cell phone, tablet, everything.
Yeah, everything.
Because it's the consumerism that's your participation. Now, if you were like, hey, man, I don't want to participate in mining operations in Africa because they're so terrible. It's like, yep, understand that. That's great. But to say, hey, I don't want to participate in a mining operation or the mining industry that is the most responsible, cleanest mining industry the world has ever known, and you're consuming the goods that are from irresponsible mining, it's like, my head just hurts.
Reading about it on your phone?
Yeah, right. You're tweeting about it or Xing it or whatever.
I think a lot of times what it really comes down to is that they just haven't, you know, many people, right, whether they're students or just kind of general public, have never really thought about it, right? They've never really kind of sat down and thought, okay, well, where do minerals really come from? And how many of them am I using right now? And then when you start bringing in like, okay, well, here's how we do it in the modern world in the United States, and here's how it's done in other places, they pretty quickly realize like, oh, I'm part of this system and I'm benefiting from this system, and it maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, remember I was saying geologists are pragmatists. Like we understand that. We're like, yeah, okay, sure, it would be great if we didn't have to have all of this copper, but if you want if we want to bring in fleets of electric vehicles, we want to increase solar, we want to increase wind, will need lots of
lot of
copper. Just actually like eye-popping volumes of copper needed to do that. But you also need rare earth elements, you need critical minerals, and much of that work can be done stateside. And then it provides jobs as well, right? So, the jobs like entry-level positions with these companies, here in Idaho, $60,000-$80,000, no problem, right?
And that's for like a 20-year-old.
It's for a 20-year-old, a two-year degree. And then many of those companies have plenty of opportunities internally to rise, and it's plenty
of overtime opportunity, the whole bit.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool opportunity that oftentimes people haven't really thought about, because it does seem like this weird old-timey job, right? Like you got your leather hat and your donkey and your pickaxe, right? And you're going to go out in the forest. It doesn't work like that, right? Except for everyone has probably an uncle or a grandpa who had a gold mine somewhere, right? But the modern world is different, and those are really good jobs for Idahoans.
Yeah. Speaking of relevance, right? As you brought it up, I've been having a lot of discussions with my wife about, again, I have young boys, you have young boys, and looking at it like, okay, dude, well, like, where do we point them? Like, what direction do we point them to have a prosperous life? And in exploring the mining industry, it's like, oh, dude, I'm not saying they have to go here, but like, there are plenty of opportunities right here, right now, that is like, I don't exactly know how AI is going to take over mining. That seems like it's like at the end of the day, you're going to need people there doing things, right? And that's a really, really valuable thing to be sharing with people, right? There's a large concern about, social benefits and whatnot right now. And somebody was telling me the other day, they're like, listen, if we plugged in more people to jobs and more people understood that these jobs were available, we would have fewer people that need these social programs. And it's like, okay, that's a really complex topic, right? But at the core of it, that actually is true as well. If we have more people that are steering towards jobs that aren't going to be eliminated in the near future at all, like maybe they will eventually, but like not in the near future, and that are accessible and that don't take a dump truck of time and money, it's like, dude, that seems like a great opportunity. And it's all right there.
Yeah. And I would say in my, I've been at CWI for 15 years, and I kind of have this little exercise at the beginning of class, like, what's your major? Where are you from? Who are you? And one of those sorts of things. And a huge percentage of my students over the last 15 years always say computer science. And I love computers, use them all the time, every day. There's one right there, right? But when I look at the amount of students that have gone to school for computer science, and I don't know any idea, I don't have any idea about the numbers.
Sure.
But I realize like those are the jobs that AI is getting better and better at doing, right? And so
they're going to get gobbled.
The notion that you could just write code, right? So that's largely gone, or one person's doing the workload that 5 people used to do. And so to me, that's one job that I see kind of on the top of the list as ones that I would be wary of. That doesn't mean that the world doesn't need computer scientists, right? We still need those jobs, but I don't think it's as, it doesn't feel as safe as it used to, right? There are other jobs, like you said, steering people into positions where, in 15 years, AI is not going to just swoop in and nab that opportunity away from you.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Listen, it's a working day. We're getting to the end of the day. I really appreciate you coming in. I don't want to strain you too much here.
No, I was just checking a message. So.
No, you're good. Yeah. You're good. As far as entry-level jobs, like within the mining sector, you obviously have mining tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are a couple other jobs that are available to people that you could engage in CWI in like a 2-year degree? Like I think you said water quality. That's one within the mining industry.
Yeah, environmental tech, hydrotech, mining tech, kind of surveying tech, and frankly, and
these are all needed within the mining.
These are all needed within the mining industry, and so the general skills to be able to do those jobs are pretty broad, right? Learning how to properly measure groundwater, learning you're not going to be doing the analysis, right? Because you're going to be a new hire. You're going to be going out and collecting the data. And so surveying, environmental data of all sorts. Largely that's water, but it could also be like plant densities and species and things. And then mining tech, which is, doing core logging, counting cracks on cores.
Sure.
Obviously the professional geologist is going to be coming behind you, kind of looking at things in a different way. But all of those jobs are readily accessible, and you don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree to get those jobs, right? Those are jobs that you can get with kind of, I wouldn't even necessarily say specialized training, but field skills, right? Actually knowing how to do the thing makes you very valuable in those situations.
Sure. And those are things like field skills are things you can get at CWI, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
So
again,
you don't even necessarily need the associate's degree. It's like, can you do these things? Associate's degree sounds like it absolutely is
Sure.
one of those helping things, but you don't necessarily have to have that even.
Yeah, so we've had really successful internship opportunities. So students who have yet to finish their 2-year degree. So we just launched our mining tech degree, which kind of adds a lot more than what we've had in the past. And so again, we were talking recently about, we just got this National Science Foundation grant, which gives us just shy of $1 million, so $900,000 to really develop that program and make sure that the students are using the same technology in the classroom or in the field setting that they would be using on site. So one example is like modern surveying equipment, right? And we've all seen, survey crew out on the road, as you're leaving to go to work. But surveying gear is not cheap, right? And so, it's going to cost a pretty decent chunk of money for us to come up with, centimeter precision survey equipment that students can use. And for a community college, that's really hard, right? We operate on pretty thin margins, but we're good at what we do. And so getting this National Science Foundation grant has really allowed us to bring in that technology and get it in the hands of students so that when they do go out in these internships or go out with a 2-year degree looking for employment, they can say like, I know how to map using ArcGIS or ArcGIS Pro, or I always say the wrong one because I learned it 20 years ago when I was in school. Right. Doing surveying work, how to work with groundwater, and how to do, basic geologic mapping and, log core, right? And so those are all skills kind of packaged into that 2-year degree.
Gotcha. I'm going to let you go because
Okay.
I kind of want to like dive down some other topics, but
Sure.
we don't have to save the day.
Sure.
Save the world in the first conversation.
Right.
I'd love to have you back if you'd be game.
Yeah.
Dude, the Stim Night Mine's awesome. You're going next September?
Yeah. It's been kind of a long story, but it's kind of come up. We've made plans and it kind of fell through over the past. So
Gotcha. Please come back. Let's do this again.
Sure.
I'd love to keep the conversation going around the industry and what you do and help people understand. It's like there are a lot of jobs and there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot to understand outside of employment. There's a lot to understand about what our relationship or at least considerations with this industry should be. I have not met anybody in the industry that's like, oh, we should forget bad things. They haven't said that. They're like, no. Those were bad things.
Right.
And let us never forget what produced those bad things.
Right.
Let's not reproduce that.
Right.
But like, let's remember it for sure. We don't have to stare at the sun all day long, but like, let's not engage in that. And let's have a more responsible relationship with our contemporary mineral extraction, not just in the United States, but in the world. Like, let's engage a better paradigm of consumerism, whereas like, hey man, there are better ways we can get these things. So every time I look at my phone, I don't feel terrible about, like what it took to get that. And, we get to be blissfully ignorant. I don't think that's a responsible thing.
I think developing that understanding is really important, right? And to get people into the mindset that like mining is necessary. Domestic mining in most cases is far better than outsourcing. There's obviously just like the realistic notion that there are more deposits in other places, right? So it's not always possible, but we've got worker protections, we have environmental protections, and those things are largely not present in other places where we're getting everything. And so really having that conversation, it's a tough conversation, right? Some people don't want to hear it. And I get it, right? Because when you see mining destruction, or you go out and there's, an old abandoned mine in the Frank Church wilderness or a place that you want to go recreate, it doesn't feel great. when someone's saying like, hey, we're going to do this again. But it's worth having the conversation saying like, no, that does not follow how we do things in the modern world. And like, let's talk about what this actually means, mining in 2025 and 2026. And the other thing that's also worth pointing out that's come up, or my students have asked me, is like, how does a mine respond to changing regulations coming from Washington, D.C., right? So you have, regulations that may be decreased or regulations that may be increased on a 4 or 8 year cycle. But oftentimes a mine, they're far more worried about the regulatory environment in 2045 than they are in 2025, right? They're kind of thinking like, this is a 30-year project. I need to make sure that our operations are going to be sustainable for the duration of the project. And as regulations are taken down or regulations are built back, that's noise, right? In some sense, they just realize like, we can't fall into that trap where like, great, let's modify our operations. And then 4 years later, here come all the regulations again. And then you're sued and your project bust, right? Like, that's not a way to run a business. And so oftentimes, students are concerned about that. They're like, what about, these new wetland designation laws? And you're like, yes, that happened. And that is a law in the books, but these companies aren't going to just be like taking advantage of all of those little blips and kind of ups and downs in the regulatory space.
Man, I want to get some more industry people in here.
Yeah.
Like, understand what the struggle is. Because I really want the answer. I really want to have the conversation of, why don't you just come and do this right now? And I'm starting to get like a broader picture of it. But still, I want to know, like, really specifically, like, what is the law that you're worried about, or who is the group, or what's the problem that you're worried about? Because again, I understand what you're saying. Like, they're looking at like a 30-year poll, and it's like they might really just make their profit from years 22 to 30, right? Whatever, and that would be a great margin, right?
Sure.
Like you'd have, if you're all profit, but you got to make it 22 years, and then you start raking it in. I mean, how long is Perpetua been up to the stibnite? It's like 12 years or something.
Yeah, probably in the neighborhood of 15 years that they've been doing work up there. And, I think they just entered construction. That'll last for 3 years. And I believe in their model, and they can strike me down if I'm wrong, I think it hits profit in year 7, right? So, all of those salaries that have been back paid and all of the work that's been going on for the last 15 years or so, there's essentially zero income, right? So the company makes money basically by selling stock, and that money goes to do all of this other work. But
you got 3 more years of construction, so that's 18 years.
Right.
Bet.
And then following that, after 7 years of production, they will cross over into the black.
So 25 years.
Right.
That's a lot. That's like the longest elephant pregnancy ever.
Right.
A lot can go wrong.
Interestingly, there's actually some talk about trying to figure out how to get antimony out during the construction phase. So there is this 3 years, which just started, frankly, a couple of weeks ago, trying to figure out a way to start getting antimony to the Department of Defense earlier than that 3 years. But I don't know anything beyond kind of that level of detail there. But there's talk of, once the construction starts, there can be some operation that happens.
Gotcha. Well, again, let's do this again. Thank you for coming in today. Thanks for sharing everything. And man, I'm just excited to learn. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.